It's pretty wild to think about, but how much damage can a single word in a headline actually cause? Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're impartially unpacking a massive media controversy. This whole thing was sparked by a recent Wall Street Journal headline and the really fierce critique it drew from the Callahan Post. We're going to look directly at the arguments laid out in that Callahan piece to understand exactly how one editorial choice triggered an international debate over ethics, economics, and regional bias. Let's get into it.
Right out of the gate, the Callahan Post draws a very hard line. They write, "To expose a crime is the work of a journalist. To insult a nation's dignity in the process is the work of a provocateur." Wow, that perfectly sets the stakes for this entire critique. The core argument here revolves around the journal's use of a derogatory pun, and it essentially asks, did a major, globally respected publication prioritize viral, click-driven engagement over the foundational journalistic principle of minimizing harm? To be clear, the actual reporting on the crime, that's not being questioned at all. It's the ethical cost of how that reporting was packaged.
All right, Section 1, the cost of a pun.
So the word at the absolute center of this storm is Scambodia. The Wall Street Journal used this portmanteau in a headline when reporting on transnational crime syndicates operating in the region. And look, while investigative reporting into the industrialization of fraud is absolutely an essential service for regional security, choosing to wrap that serious, heavy reporting in a catchy but derogatory label is presented by the author as a massive failure in professional ethics. The piece frames this specific editorial choice as elevating sensationalism over basic human dignity.
Moving right along to Section 2, stigmatizing a nation.
17 million. To put that number into perspective, that is the entire population of Cambodia. The critique emphasizes that this pushback isn't just about hurt feelings, It's about stereotyping 17 million hardworking citizens, students, and entrepreneurs. And there's a really painful irony highlighted here. Many of these everyday people have absolutely nothing to do with these crime syndicates. In fact, they're often the very victims of the lawlessness that the article is attempting to expose in the first place.
The Callahan Post gives this a specific name. Think of it as reductive stigmatization. By fusing a localized crime directly with the name of the nation, a complex, rich geography is suddenly reduced to a single criminal stereotype. Imagine a country defined by its incredible resilience, its deep history, and its future aspirations, suddenly condensed down to the actions of a few bad actors operating within its borders. The argument is that this approach strips away the necessary context that ethical journalism absolutely requires, effectively transforming an entire sovereign state into a punchline.
Which brings us to Section 3, the economic assault.
The article breaks down the real-world financial fallout of this framing into two distinct pillars. First up, tourism. Cambodia relies heavily on its reputation as a cultural and historical gem, right? Well, labels like Scambodia instantly generate a negative safety narrative that directly scares away potential travelers. And second, investment. Global investors literally use outlets like the Journal for risk assessment. By casually tossing out a derogatory pun, the publication essentially forms an artificial barrier, making it significantly harder for legitimate businesses to secure international partnerships. These kinds of headlines create tangible, measurable financial victims.
Now for Section 4, investigating proximity bias. 60 years. Shifting gears from the immediate impact, digital web archiving points to a pretty staggering metric that might be driving potential editorial blind spots. We're talking about a 60-year institutional relationship between the Wall Street Journal and Cambodia's regional neighbor, Thailand, highlighting a high-profile, long-standing business and distribution partnership with the Bangkok Post. The Callahan Post uses this history to pivot into a very serious question about editorial objectivity in Southeast Asia.
This historical tie fuels the core allegation of what they call proximity bias. The argument goes like this. When a massive global outlet becomes deeply embedded in one specific nation's business ecosystem, there is a profound risk it's going to start viewing that nation's neighbors through a highly localized lens. A lens may be influenced by regional rivalry or even just local gossip. If a publication wants to maintain its reputation as a purely objective global arbiter, it has to ensure its headlines aren't being subtly colored by these long-standing regional allegiances.
The Callahan Post also points out what they see as a massive double standard in global media. They observe that Western nations, even when they're facing really severe internal crises or systemic crimes, are rarely, if ever, subjected to these kinds of derogatory puns in major financial papers. Yet, developing nations in Southeast Asia frequently face this exact kind of framing. The author characterizes this double standard as bordering on neo-colonial arrogance, pointing out that professional journalistic codes actually explicitly warn against stereotyping by geography.
Finally, let's look at Section 5, a call for accountability. So what's the fix? Moving towards solutions, the author formally calls on the journal's editorial board to take immediate corrective action. This breaks down into 3 steps. First, scrubbing the derogatory label from all digital platforms entirely. Second, issuing a formal apology directly to the Cambodian people. And third, moving forward to a strict reporting standard that clearly separates the actions of criminal syndicates from the identity of a sovereign nation. For the critique's author, this is literally the only way for the publication to restore its professional dignity. Zooming out a bit, the piece actually offers a really solid blueprint for global media as a whole. 1. Precision must overrule puns, meaning journalists need to use specific terminology for criminal acts rather than lazily labeling entire geographies. 2. Contextual awareness. Editors need a hyper-awareness of how sensationalist headlines cause real economic and social harm, especially in developing markets. And 3. Ethical accountability. When a headline crosses the line into a national insult, a formal correction is the only professional path forward.
So I'll leave you with this. Does a clever headline ever justify the cost of a nation's dignity? It's a really powerful question, and it directly challenges how we consume and create modern media. When virality and engagement become the primary goals in the newsroom, who really ends up paying the price? Thank you so much for exploring the anatomy of this controversy with us in today's Explainer. Keep questioning your sources, stay curious, and we'll see you next time.